Take it, I don't need it. Jamie suddenly showed up with these words, leaving my husband and me speechless. I'm Angelica, 42 years old. My husband is Gordy, 46 years old. We got married when I was 26, but we never had children. Angelica, you always wanted kids, right? So I'm giving you mine. Giving your child? I stammered. You talk about your child like they're kittens. Gordy added. We were baffled by her casual and outrageous statement. It's just, kids talk too much. She complained. Of course they do. You talk too, don't you? I replied. That's not it. There's a time and place for everything, but they always talk at the worst times. She retorted. What kind of excuse is that? And they cry if they don't eat 3 meals a day. You'd be in trouble too if you didn't eat, Gordy pointed out. Her excuses were so absurd that I couldn't help but voice my disbelief. Then, but I don't cry. I just think of it as a way to stay on my diet, Jamie said. Her reasoning was beyond ridiculous. I had to speak up. Kids don't diet. And besides, I looked at the child, who was thin and frail. Their clothes were dirty, and they clearly hadn't been cared for properly. Then Jamie revealed her true feelings. I can't go out whenever I want. I have a new boyfriend, and I want to go on dates, but I can't because of this kid. It's my ex-husband's leftover. And if I leave them in the car, people call me a criminal. It's such a hassle. I have my reasons for wanting to leave them. The way she said it was unbelievable. So, just like people trade pets online, I'm giving you my kid. You've always wanted one, right, Angelica? So here you go. I'll leave the clothes and everything. Just don't leave them in the car to bake, okay? What? Jamie said bye, placed a garbage bag filled with clothes at the entrance, left the child, and walked away. Gordy and I stood there in shock. But the child was not at fault. How old is she? Gordy asked me. Laura, how old are you? I asked, not remembering her age. 8. She replied. 2nd grade, then. I thought she was in kindergarten. Yeah, she's so skinny. Let's have her stay at our place for now. We decided to let her stay with us for the night. But we couldn't leave things as they were. The next day, I took a day off work and went to the elementary school. I sent Laura to her classroom and met with the assistant principal. It's about Laura. The assistant principal began. It seems that her parents have been neglecting her. She often comes to school in the same clothes, and it appears she isn't getting enough to eat at home, as she eats voraciously during lunch. We've contacted Child Protective Services. And the assistant principal continued. Additionally, Laura has been using abusive language towards her classmates, so she doesn't have any friends. What kind of abusive language? I asked, wanting to know the specifics. Shut up, be quiet, go away, were the phrases she used. Ah. I immediately recognized where those words came from. Jamie must have said them to Laura. The assistant principal suggested, given these circumstances and the fact that Laura's mother has gone missing after leaving her with you, we might need to temporarily place her in foster care. However, that was not the solution Gordy and I wanted. No, we understand. We intend to take her in ourselves, I replied. Adopting her was the decision Gordy and I had come to after discussing it the previous night. Thus, we decided to take her in. When we informed Gordy's parents and my parents over the phone, they were shocked. But after explaining the condition of her clothes, her thin body, and what we learned at school, they both understood. Gordy said, "Laura, from today, your uncle and aunt will act as your father and mother. But even though we say act, we will treat you as our own, so please call us father and mother." Laura responded harshly, "Shut up, you old man!" showing a defiant attitude. "Stop the... Such language is forbidden from now on," Gordy sternly said. Laura pouted. But he continued, "Does saying that make you feel better, Laura? If it doesn't, then no one benefits. So, stop using such words." She fell silent. I straightened my posture, feeling that this was how it should be. Life with Laura was not easy. She would break dishes and throw things, as if testing us. Each time, I would hug her and say, "You must have been lonely." When I heard that she had used abusive language towards her friends, we would go together to apologize to their house. "I'm sorry for not realizing sooner that your previous mother pushed you to say such things," I would say while hugging her again. Honestly, it was a test of endurance. But I had always wanted a child, and now there was one right here with me. Today, Laura. During dinner with Gordy, I could talk about everything Laura did that day, the good and the bad, and it made me incredibly happy. Every day, I helped her change her clothes and made sure she took a bath. One day, I noticed, "You don't have any hair accessories. How about we go buy some cute hair ties together?" She smiled brightly and said, "Thank you." She was adorable, and her smile made me happy. Looking back, I think that was the first time she truly opened her heart to me. Gradually, her shut up turned into thank you. One day, as Laura slowly began to open her heart and I felt that she was becoming our child. "I think I might want to apply for this," Laura said, bringing me a newspaper. It was an advertisement for a children's theater group. Although it was a theater group, it also seemed to be a talent agency for TV appearances. "I feel like I've become a different person since meeting you, Mom. But I want to try becoming other people too," she said. "That's great. You should pursue whatever you want to do." I promised to support her. Even though it might sound biased coming from her mother, Laura had become quite lovely as she cleaned up and received proper nutrition. Fortunately, she passed the theater group's audition. Her memory was impressive, and she gradually started appearing on TV in minor child actor roles. 4 years passed. During this time, we obtained permission from the family court to officially adopt Laura. Adopting a minor usually requires the legal guardian's signature, which should have been Jamie's, but she was missing, making the process extremely difficult. One day, we received a death notice. My uncle had passed away, and we decided to attend the funeral as a family. There, we unexpectedly encountered Jamie. "So it was Laura. I saw her on TV from time to time," Jamie said. Relatives around us started buzzing, recognizing her. "I thought you wouldn't come since you've been out of touch," I said with a hint of sarcasm. I had to let out at least this much after everything. Jamie replied, "I was thinking of asking you to return Laura today." "What?" Gordy and I were stunned for a moment. After the funeral, we decided to hear more from Jamie. Jamie, sitting across from me, began to speak. "Well, she might not be super famous, but if she's appearing on TV shows and dramas, she must be earning a decent amount in appearance fees, right? If she returns to being my child, that money would come to me. So, I want you to return her to me." What an outrageous claim. Her selfishness left me speechless. There was no way I would let a woman who talked like that take my precious Laura away. "All of her appearance fees go directly into her own account. It's money she'll use in the future. We've never touched it." I retorted. Angelica, you can do that because you have Gordy. But if Laura comes back to me, I'll use the money as my own. That's already decided, Jamie replied. She continued. It's not just that. Apparently, raising a child comes with a support family program or something. I think it's unfair that Angelica is getting that without even giving birth. What? Unfair? And furthermore, even if I live with my boyfriend without getting married, there's some 10 Poors project or whatever that gives you money. So just having Laura means money. That's why I want her back. I mean, Angelica, you both work, so you're not struggling financially, right? But I am. Do you remember what you said before? You said it was too much trouble to feed her. And now you just want the money that comes with Laura. I spoke, trembling with anger. This was too convenient. My head was full of rage. But Jamie continued, ignoring my anger. She can make her own meals now, right? By 6th grade, she should be able to cook for us too. Well, if you insist, I could give her back to you when those subsidies stop. You can raise her again then, right? What? What is she saying? This is insane. My head was about to explode. But then, that's enough! The loud voice came from my mother, Patty. The shout was so loud that all our relatives, who were having a meal, turned to look at us. Without caring, Patty continued. Could everyone please take a look at this? Patty inserted a DVD into a player. The large-screen TV displayed the video. Inevitably, all our relatives watched. The video featured Laura announcing her retirement from the entertainment industry. It was something the agency had filmed. As a keepsake, I had received a copy from the agency and had duplicated it for my parents. Upon seeing this, Jamie let out a strained "Eh?" The screen showed Laura speaking. If the world were a village of 100 people, it's said that 20 wouldn't have enough to eat, and one would be on the verge of dying from starvation. Until the 2nd grade, I was one of those 20, even in wealthy Japan. I was emaciated because my birth mother didn't provide me with proper meals. If I had stayed with my birth mother, I might have become that one person close to death. But my new dad and mom saved me. My new mom is the older sister of my birth mother. I want to work towards a world where all 100 people can eat, so I'll focus on my studies to help create such a future. She was speaking on the screen. What? Jamie's voice trailed off again. Patty paused the DVD and turned to Jamie with a stern look. So, Laura has quit her job. Even if you try to take her earnings, it's pointless. Jamie's face turned pale. What? Hey, Laura, you little. How dare you ruin this high-paying option for yourself? Jamie shouted and lunged at her. Gordy quickly pinned her down. Jamie was so furious, she seemed ready to bite off Gordy's fingers. Whispers of not feeding her abuse echoed from our relatives in the room. Patty pressed the play button on the DVD again. The interview continued. Laura was being asked about the abuse from her birth mother, and she answered. Not being given meals was a regular occurrence. When I complained about being hungry, she would yell at me, saying, "I'm on the phone with my boyfriend." Shut up. When I gnawed on dry instant noodles without adding water, she'd kick me for eating without permission. She did all that. How could anyone do that to their own child? That's just too cruel. The whispered comments and the piercing looks of our relatives were all directed at Jamie. But Jamie didn't seem to notice. Her mind was entirely focused on money. She started rambling. My calculations were off. The take-home pay has reduced significantly, But with the 10 Pores project and the Support Family program, it still helps cover living expenses. Until then, Laura is mine. The relatives' gazes grew even colder. The only one oblivious to it was Jamie. In that icy atmosphere, the final missile struck. That's called fraudulent claims. This time, it was my father who delivered the blow. Living with a common law partner and trying to receive the 10 Pores project benefits is fraudulent. What are you thinking? Every time you've done whatever you pleased, I've tried to advise you. You've ignored me each time, but I won't tolerate this. This is a matter of my grandchild. I had never seen my father scold someone so harshly before. Even Jamie, who had just managed to escape from being pinned down, was shocked by this. No, What's different? I confronted her. When you brought Laura to us, her clothes were filthy, and while a normal second grader weighs about 23 kilograms, she was only 15 kilograms. You neglected her to the point of emaciation, and now you have the audacity to say you want her back? Don't make me laugh. I did say I was just asking you to take care of her. So now I'm asking you to return her. That's perfectly reasonable. Jamie screamed, almost in tears. Then Gordy added to the attack. You're not the only parent here. We've legally adopted Laura. We're her parents too. Unlike you, we're her legal guardians. Do you think you can just take Laura without being her guardian? If you really want to take her back, you'll have to go to family court and say you're taking Laura back from a happy life for fraudulent benefits. Why? Why? What the hell is this? Jamie crouched down, crying and screaming. Is it so wrong to ask for something I entrusted to be returned? Why are you all attacking me? Shut up, all of you. Shut up? You always use that phrase to shut me up, Laura said, standing in front of Jamie, who was now crouched and crying. When I said I was hungry, you'd say shut up. When I said I wanted to take a bath because my body was itchy, you'd say shut up. When I tried to talk about my day, you'd say shut up, I'm on the phone with my boyfriend. You never listened to me. But my new mom is different. When I say I'm hungry, she asks what I want to eat. I don't even have to ask to take a bath, she makes sure I do every day. When I say Mom, today, she listens happily until the end. I won't go back to you. I still need to ask if I can stay, but... Laura then turned to me and Gordy. Mom. Dad. Thank you for raising me. Thank you for becoming my new parents. May I continue to be your child? My face was a mess with tears. Of course you can. Of course. Please let me stay as your mom forever. Laura and I embraced. And our relatives applauded us. Except for Jamie, who muttered, Why? Laura never became a famous child actor. She was not well known at all. In fact, she was incredibly unknown. That's why she quietly left the theater group. However, a child actor who left after exposing abuse by her birth mother and talking about her dreams for the future became a small topic. It was briefly discussed by an educational commentator in a small segment. Jamie kept bragging about Laura, who was on TV, saying, I gave birth to that girl. This constant boasting led to the revelation of her identity as an abusive mother. And soon, rumors spread like wildfire, with people whispering, Is she that awful biological mother? This forced Jamie to move far away. This also meant she had to break up with her long-term boyfriend, or rather, her common-law partner. As for me, I spent my mornings making lunches for Laura, who was diligently aiming for college, going about my day as usual. Mom, I'm off. Laura called out. Have a good day. Don't forget your water bottle. I replied, feeling a warmth in the simple exchange. Want a ride to the station? I'll drop you off. Gordy offered as he was about to leave for work. Great! It's so hot, that'll really help, Laura exclaimed, and the two of them got into the car. Have a good day. I waved as they drove off. Soon, Laura would be a high school student. I hoped that one day she would bring home a boyfriend who would drive her around. I thought about this as I watched them leave. Hey, Nicole is already 20, so we can get divorced without child support. That's why we should get married soon, Rachel. I heard the familiar voice of my husband James from behind me. As I turned around, I saw a man and a woman sitting face to face at a table a short distance away. Dad. Nicole, my daughter, was the first to notice. On this day, I had taken Nicole to a fancy restaurant to celebrate her 20th birthday and splurge a little. I didn't recognize the woman sitting across from James, but she looked much younger than him. The two seemed oblivious to the stares around them, holding each other's hands tightly. No matter how you look at it, they don't seem like just acquaintances, do they? Nicole muttered in a cold tone. Yeah, it seems that way. And I nodded in agreement. You'll really marry me finally? Wow, thank you. I can finally be free from my aging wife and spoiled daughter. I love only you, Rachel. I swear I'll protect you for the rest of my life. Hey, there's this church I've always dreamed of. Why don't we go see it together this Saturday? Yeah, we can just tell them I have a business trip and make up some excuse. They'll buy it. I want to go on a trip with you again. Unaware that we were listening nearby, James and his mistress Rachel were lost in their own little world. This is kinda gross. I'm going over there for a sec. With those words, Nicole slowly got up from her seat and made her way to James and Rachel's table. Congratulations on your marriage, you too. My name is Misty, and I'm 53 years old. I married my elite businessman husband James in my 30s and have supported him as a housewife for over 20 years since then. 3 years after our marriage, I gave birth to Nicole, and now she's already 20. Time really flies. My life so far hasn't been all fun and games. I lost my mother to cancer when I was in middle school, and after that, with my father's support, I somehow managed to graduate from high school and college. My father also became sickly after turning 70, and a few years later, he passed away and went to heaven. Nicole, who was in middle school at the time, had been doted on by her grandfather since she was little, and I remember her saying to her peacefully sleeping grandfather, "Grandpa, thank you. I'm going to become a hero of justice like you." I'll never forget the words my father left to me and Nicole just before he took his last breath. When I die, I want you to use my inheritance effectively to help others. Those words were so characteristic of my father. With my father's last words in my heart, I resolved to keep living. James was an excellent employee at a major corporation, but he didn't seem to get along well with his strict father, William. Even when he visited his parents' home once or twice a year, he hardly ever tried to engage with his father on his own. "I just can't deal with William," he would always say with a deep sigh while driving back home. "He can be tough, but that's not all there is to him." Of course, when I misbehaved as a child, my father would often scold me, but I also knew his kind side. So, I hoped that the relationship between my father and my husband would improve someday. Well. Honestly, it's a relief to think that I'll be free from that difficult man. After my father's funeral, while Nicole and I were deep in grief, I felt sad when I saw James alone, smiling. "Dad, you can't say things like that." Grandpa was a good person. You got along well with William. Maybe you've even started to take after his personality? He frowned, looking annoyed. With the absence of his strict father, he started going out and about as if he had lost control. He wouldn't come home after work, and even when he did occasionally, he wouldn't say a word to me or Nicole before heading out again. Dad, you're going out again? Think about Mom a little, will you? When Nicole complained, he would get irritated. Shut up. I'm sick and tired of looking at that woman's face, he would say without even glancing at me before leaving. Eventually, he stopped contributing the salary he earned to the household. Nicole is about to start high school. There will be expenses for tuition, cram school, and whatnot. Surely you understand that much? No matter how many times I pleaded, James wouldn't listen. Instead, I noticed that he had gotten a new car, and brand name receipts started appearing from his pockets. No matter how much I questioned him. It's none of your business, James would only say. I gradually started to feel that complaining was futile, and I stopped saying anything. A person like that isn't a father. Nicole had completely lost faith in James, and it was understandable. Don't worry. I'll figure out the money somehow so that you can go to school properly. Since getting married, I had no work experience, and it was financially tough, but I decided to use part of my father's inheritance for Nicole. My father had said to use the inheritance for helping people, but this was for Nicole's future. I'm sure my father would forgive me. It was when Nicole was in high school, during career counseling. In the future, I want to become a lawyer. I want to become a lawyer and help people in need. That's why I'm aiming for law school. Her eyes were shining as she declared this clearly. You can do it, Nicole. I decided to support Nicole with everything I had as she started working towards the entrance exams. To help Nicole concentrate on her studies, I carefully moved around to avoid making household noises. I even set my own rules, like calling out to her when she came out of her room to offer her a late-night snack. Thanks, Mom. But don't worry too much. If you overdo it and ruin your health, I won't be able to focus on studying at all, Nicole said with a wry smile, as I was worrying excessively. Before I knew it, Nicole had grown up into a full-fledged adult, and I realized my daughter's growth in unexpected ways. In contrast, James would carelessly turn up the TV volume to watch sports games or even sing in the bath, despite her studying in her room. The breadwinner of the family worked hard at his job again today. When you become an elite like me, everyone relies on you, so every day is tough. Hey, Misty, give me a shoulder massage. Can't you be a little quieter? Nicole is going through a tough time studying for her entrance exams right now. Huh? She's a cheeky daughter who talks back to me. There's no way she'll pass the exams anyway. She's your own daughter. And you call yourself a father? You hardly even contribute to the living expenses. You're lucky you have an inheritance. Be grateful to your beloved father. Ha! As I bit my lip in frustration, I heard the sound of the room door being flung open forcefully. Dad, enough already. Nicole angrily strode towards James. If you're only going to get in the way, we don't need a father like you in this house. Just leave already. Fine. I'll leave. I can't be bothered to take care of an incompetent daughter born from an incompetent mother. Perhaps enraged by Nicole's direct words, James stormed out of the house in his old shirt, without even changing. I'm sorry. I'm fine. In the future, I'll definitely become a lawyer and show that kind of father what I'm made of. My daughter's reassuring words made me feel refreshed. And then, the day of the acceptance announcement arrived. Nicole, who had received the results from the university via email, called me. "Mom, I passed." The moment I heard the news, I sank into the sofa, feeling all the strength leave my body, and I was in a daze for a while. "Hello, Mom? Are you listening?" "I'm sorry, I'm listening properly." Congratulations. Nicole had successfully gotten into the law school of her first-choice university. Moreover, it seemed she was eligible for a tuition waiver, as she had achieved top-class results in the entrance exam rankings. When she came home, I congratulated her again. "Congratulations, Nicole. I knew you would definitely get in." "Thanks, Mom. But this is just a milestone. My goal is to become a lawyer and help as many people in need as possible," Nicole said, not content with her current situation and already looking ahead. As I listened to Nicole's words, I suddenly remembered my late father's face, and before I knew it, my tears were flowing uncontrollably. "What's up? Did something good happen?" he asked suspiciously as he returned home. I had told him in advance that this day was the university's acceptance announcement day, but James didn't seem to remember even that. "Well, Dad, I got into the law school brilliantly." When Nicole said this proudly, James didn't even congratulate her. "I don't need dinner. I'm going out again right after I take a shower," he said in a cold manner and headed to the bathroom. "It's the usual, but it seems to be getting worse lately. I bet he's having an affair or something." "This is just my intuition as a daughter, though." "No way. That's a bit of a stretch." I laughed it off, but I had been feeling the same way as Nicole's intuition for a while now. James would go out at night, and each time he would wear cologne that he didn't usually wear to work and change into fashionable clothes before leaving. And on this night, too, he was dressed up fashionably from head to toe and giving off a scent of cologne. "Where are you going now?" "It's obviously for work. I'm an elite, so I'm busy." "You need cologne too?" "You weren't wearing it during the day at work, though." "It's none of your business. It depends on the client. Don't say anything if you don't know how society works." With that, he ran out of the house as if escaping. "It's definitely suspicious." He averted his gaze. He was clearly flustered. Her intuition was probably right. However, we didn't have a single piece of evidence to pursue it. After that, Nicole started living alone in a cheap apartment to attend university. Studying is important, but you also need to relax and take a breather once in a while. When Nicole came home to visit, I advised her based on my own college days. "Don't worry. I'm trying to take breaks in my own way." The other day, a friend took me to a cheap and delicious restaurant, and then to a botanical garden. "Is this friend a guy?" "Does it matter?" Nicole, who usually spoke calmly, showed a bit of hesitation, which was rare for her, but I decided to laugh it off. Come to think of it, Nicole was about to turn 20. It wouldn't be strange for her to take appropriate breaks at her age. Remembering that Nicole's birthday was just around the corner, I made a suggestion. "Why don't we eat out as a family for once? It's your 20th birthday, so it might be nice to have something a little fancy and toast with some alcohol." That sounds great. When I mentioned this to James, he remained expressionless as usual. "If you want to go that badly, you two can go. I'll be busy with work that day too. I don't have time to waste like you guys." He added unnecessary comments that he didn't need to say and left. "Well, it's the usual, but let's just ignore him and enjoy ourselves," Nicole said with a carefree smile, so I let it go. "You're right." I laughed. For her birthday, I made a reservation at a fancy restaurant. When we entered, the staff guided us to our reserved table. At first, I was nervous about the unfamiliar atmosphere of the high-end restaurant, but gradually, as I heard the chatter of other customers in the store, I felt my heart relax along with the pleasant background music.
Are you sure? Don't you think this kind of fancy place is out of our league? Even if it's your 20th birthday, it's no different from your previous birthdays, right?
Then should we cancel?
No way. Since we're here, let's enjoy the delicious food.
That's my daughter, honest and good.
I'm honored to be praised.
Even from a mother's perspective, I think she has grown into a mature and beautiful woman. I had heard rumors that several men had approached her at university. To think that she used to be such a small and cute child. When she was little, James and I often took her to family restaurants. Nicole always ordered from the kids' menu because she wanted the toys with the menu.
What? Is there something on my face?
I denied it, still smiling. It's nothing. I just thought it was a little sad that Dad wasn't here.
Let's forget about him today. Besides, we came all the way to eat French cuisine, so we have to enjoy it, or it'll be a waste.
As if shaking off my melancholy mood. You're right. I nodded.
Well then, should I ask about your boyfriend?
What's that about? Change the subject. We were having a good time with such trivial conversations, but...
Hey, she's 22, right? We can get divorced without child support now. Let's get married right away.
I heard a familiar male voice from behind me. When I turned around, I saw a couple sitting face to face at a table a short distance away. Dad. Nicole was the first to notice. I didn't recognize the woman sitting across from him, but she was much younger than James. The two were holding hands, unconcerned about the gazes around them.
No matter how you look at it, they don't seem like just acquaintances, right?
Nicole muttered in a cold tone.
Yeah, it seems that way.
I nodded in agreement.
Really? Wow, thank you. I love you, James. I can finally be free from my aging wife and nagging daughter. I love only one person in this world, Rachel. I swear I'll protect you for the rest of my life.
James said those embarrassing words boldly.
This is kinda gross.
I also felt like covering both of my ears.
Hey, there's this church I've always dreamed of. Why don't we go see it together this Saturday?
Yeah, we can just tell them I have a business trip, and they'll buy it. I want to go on a trip with you again. Unaware that we were listening nearby, James and his mistress were lost in their own little world. Watching the two of them laughing loudly without any shame, despite other customers being present, made me feel embarrassed for them. As I stood there, unable to move due to anger and embarrassment, Nicole stood up. Nicole's expression was surprisingly calm, and seeing that, I felt like something had snapped inside me too.
I'm going over there for a sec.
With those words, Nicole slowly got up from her seat and made her way to James and Rachel's table.
Congratulations on your marriage, you too.
When Nicole called out cheerfully, James didn't seem to realize it was his daughter at first, and as he turned around,
Thank you.
He showed a softer smile than I had ever seen him show in front of us. However, the moment he realized that the person who had called out to him was none other than his own daughter, he exclaimed,
Nicole! What are you doing here?
And fell over with his chair in shock. Are you okay, Dad? Did you hurt yourself anywhere? Nicole asked in a gentle tone and extended her hand to James, whose mouth was wide open.
Why are you here?
James slapped Nicole's hand away, stood up on unsteady feet, and looked around. Then, when he saw me, he said,
I knew you were here too. Don't tell me you've been following me all this time?
It's just a coincidence. I told you, didn't I? Today is Nicole's 20th birthday, so we're eating out. I chose this restaurant because I thought we should splurge a little for once. I replied calmly, stood up from my seat, and stood next to Nicole. The woman who was James' mistress, Rachel, said, "You too, could you be James' wife and daughter?" Despite being caught in the act of cheating, Rachel was smirking triumphantly for some reason. "I'm Rachel. James has been taking care of me both professionally and privately." "Oh, professionally and privately, huh? Well, thank you for always taking care of my husband." "Rachel, are you planning to marry my father?"
"That's right. James always tells me. It's not his wife or daughter that he loves. It's me."
James, who had been listening beside us, seemed to have become defiant.
"That's right. Rachel is kind and beautiful. And above all, she's much younger than you. I love Rachel more than you too."
"I heard Misty is a terrible wife. James always tells me. Even when he comes home tired from work, you don't cook, do laundry, or clean for him, right? It's only natural that James got fed up with you."
"That's not true. My mother has been selflessly serving our family for years without a single complaint. It's my father who goes out without even eating the meals my mother makes."
Nicole, who had been insulted along with me, showed her emotions for the first time that day. "Nicole, was it? I've heard about you too. Despite inheriting the blood of the highly educated elite James, you're a good-for-nothing daughter who's satisfied with just getting into a third-rate university." I was more shocked by the insults directed at Nicole than the ones directed at me.
"Did you really say something like that? This child has been desperately working hard to be useful to people in the future, and she got into her dream school."
I'm just stating facts. I mean, isn't it true? You only managed to get into a third-rate university using your father's inheritance. I bet you're not even studying properly now and just playing around. The moment James said that to my face, I made a decision.
"I understand. If that's how you feel, there's no point in living together with you anymore. Let's get divorced, just like you wanted."
When I said that, James seemed convinced that things were going according to his plan and exchanged smiles with Rachel.
"And one more thing, I'll be taking appropriate compensation from Rachel over there as well." "You're joking. Why should I have to pay you compensation? I mean, isn't it obvious? Stealing someone else's husband is not ethically acceptable." "I was just invited to dinner by James, my boss at work. Do you have any proof that I'm his mistress? Having dinner with your boss is pretty common in the world."
She started making desperate excuses. When I admitted, "You're right about that," Rachel looked relieved. "Well then, how about this?" I grabbed James' smartphone while he was off guard and checked his message history and saved images. "I see. Last month, you and James abandoned work and spent the whole day at a hotel. A week after that, you two went on a day trip. Looks like you had quite a lot of fun."
"Give it back. This is a violation of privacy."
You know, I've been suspecting your affair for a while now and gained some legal knowledge. I thought a day like this might come. I'm glad I studied up." Looking around, I saw other customers and staff giving us strange looks. "Everyone, I apologize for disturbing your meal." Wanting to avoid causing any more trouble for the restaurant, I quickly paid the bill and said to James in a low voice, "Well then, we'll continue this conversation later." Before leaving the restaurant with Nicole. A few minutes after we got home, James and Rachel came chasing after us. James had a sly smile on his face, as if he had a clever idea. "Did you come up with some scheme while riding in the taxi?" When I asked in exasperation, James and Rachel exchanged glances and laughed sarcastically.
Fine. I'll divorce you. But you have to give me a cut too.
I wondered what James meant by a cut.
You inherited a large sum of money from the late William, right? I'm telling you to share that with me. If we're getting divorced, it's only natural to have a division of property, isn't it? No. Ever since you two started hating me, I've been comforted by Rachel every day. So I've been giving Rachel lots of presents out of love and gratitude. Well, it's fine as long as I can get half of the inheritance. No way. The reason you haven't been contributing money to the household was to give it to that woman? And because of that, you didn't pay a penny for Nicole's tuition or college entrance exam fees? Are you saying she became a sacrifice for that woman? Are you saying Nicole became a sacrifice for that woman? Don't say such nasty things like sacrifice. It's up to me to decide who I love and who I spend money on, isn't it?
James said it without any shame and ostentatiously embraced Rachel. Even though I had acquired some legal knowledge, I was still an amateur after all. I didn't know all the professional details, so when he brought up the topic of shared property, I couldn't retort. Seeing me at a loss for words, unable to argue back, James had a smug smile on his face.
Don't tell me you were planning to monopolize William's inheritance all by yourself. We're married, so of course I have a right to it too. Besides, you'll probably just waste it anyway. What do you mean, waste it? I won't waste my father's inheritance. You're already wasting it. Nicole's tuition. You used William's inheritance for that, didn't you? What else would you call this but a waste of money? It's not just the inheritance. I've been keeping this from you, but I've actually been investing too. I didn't want to rely solely on my father's inheritance.
When James found out that I had been making some profit from investing, he smirked.
That's subject to division of property too. We'll divide William's inheritance and the investment profits. Of course, I have a huge advantage since I'm the one working. You'll barely scrape by, I suppose?
Rachel, who was next to him, laughed along with James. I bit my lip in frustration, but there was nothing more I could do. Then Nicole lightly patted my shoulder and said, "It's okay, Mom. These people won't get their way. I'll teach them that reality isn't so sweet. Hey.
It's pointless to act tough after coming this far. You've essentially lost. If you're joining the adult world, you should graciously admit defeat."
Sorry, but Grandpa's inheritance doesn't become marital property.
What?
James, who had been laughing loudly, fell silent as if time had stopped, his mouth agape. It seems like you were counting on Grandpa's large inheritance, but the inheritance was passed down to Mom alone. So unlike other shared property, it won't be distributed to you, Dad.
That's ridiculous. You're lying. You think you can trick us because we're amateurs when it comes to the law, don't you?
Nicole sighed in exasperation. Then we can have a showdown if you want. Why don't I consult with the law school professor I'm always indebted to? They might introduce me to an excellent lawyer too. Should we go to court?
Wait. There's no need to make such a big deal out of this.
James, who had been a successful elite company employee for a long time, probably thought that if his affair led to a lawsuit, it would tarnish his career. It was too late to panic now, and even though everything was his own fault.
I understand. I'll give up on the inheritance. I'll agree to the divorce too. I'll divide our shared assets and pay the alimony properly. Of course, I'll make Rachel pay alimony too. So please, just spare me the lawsuit.
James pleaded. The one who couldn't stand the situation was Rachel, James' mistress, not us.
You've got to be kidding. I absolutely won't pay any alimony. I only dated James because I thought he was rich in the first place. He bought me expensive bags, rings, and even took me on trips and to delicious meals. He gave me such a luxurious life, so I just assumed he was wealthy. That's right, I'm one of the victims who was deceived by this man too.
Well then, shall we file a lawsuit? Nicole laughed.
That's what I want. Stop it. Rachel, give it up. If we go to court, we have no chance of winning. Please, Rachel, calm down. I'm begging you, please accept it.
James desperately restrained Rachel, who had lost her mind and started rampaging.
Well then, please excuse us for today,
James said, even though it was his own house, and dragged Rachel's body out as she desperately resisted. I wonder if Dad will stay at a hotel today?
Let him do what he wants. It's already late today, so I'll go to the courthouse tomorrow to get the divorce papers. I also need to find a job and a place to live. I wonder if there are any good listings.
After that, James and I finalized our divorce. Well then, thank you for everything up until now. I wish you happiness for many years to come, I said with a smile and waved to James, but it seems James and Rachel's relationship deteriorated to the point where it couldn't be repaired. According to rumors, even at work, the two of them would have huge fights every chance they got. Or rather, Rachel would curse at James without regard for who was watching. Naturally, the fact that they were having an affair became known to those around them, and James couldn't endure the cold stares from his colleagues and subordinates, eventually being forced to quit. It's all over. I have no one but Misty now. Despite everything that's happened, I really do need you too. So please, come back to me. Give me another chance. Saying that, James came to my workplace where I had started working, but it was so troublesome that I called the police without hesitation.
This is a matter between husband and wife. Outsiders have no right to interfere.
However, our divorce had already been finalized, so James was mercilessly taken away by the police officers who had rushed over. James didn't end up getting arrested, only receiving a stern warning, but he didn't learn his lesson and this time barged into the university Nicole attends. There too, he was pathetically turned away by the security guards, and James, still unable to give up, went to the apartment where Nicole lives. However, the moment he opened the front door, there stood a sturdy man. Surprised, James reportedly ran away. At this time, the person visiting Nicole's room was Kevin, a member of the rugby team at the same university who was dating Nicole. Nicole was in the back room, so she didn't notice, but later Kevin told her about the incident. She burst out laughing and couldn't stop, and she called me to share the story too. Having lost his source of income and depleted his savings, James found himself homeless, living on the streets. One day, as I was walking past the park, I caught a glimpse of a disheveled James diligently carrying cardboard boxes. I tried to leave the area quickly, hoping he wouldn't notice me. At that moment, a female acquaintance happened to call out to me. "Isn't that man your ex-husband?"
No, not at all. I don't know him.
I denied instinctively and fled from the woman as well. Time passed, and Nicole brought Kevin, the man she was dating, to our home. "This is Kevin. Nicole and I are in a relationship with the intention of getting married," he introduced himself. Kevin might have been a bit too serious at times, but he seemed sincere, which was what mattered most. As we reminisced about my late father, Nicole declared,
You know, I'm definitely going to pass the bar exam and become a lawyer. I want to become a lawyer so I can help people in need. I want to be a hero, just like Grandpa.
Suddenly, I felt a gaze upon me and turned around. My father's photograph was smiling gently, as if approving of her aspirations.
Look, that's my friend's dad.
This happened when I attended my beloved niece Gloria's parents' day. I was shocked to see a couple walking into the classroom. Because the man, cozying up to a woman I didn't recognize, was my own husband, Mike. After talking to Gloria, everything clicked for me. So, that's what it was all about. I'll never forgive this. As Mike was about to leave the classroom, I blocked his way, putting on a smile. Let's continue to get along as families, shall we? Please, stay with us until the end to see the turmoil that unfolds from here. My name is Emily, I'm 33 years old, and we're a dual-income couple in our 5th year of marriage. My husband's name is Mike. We met in a sort of half-set-up situation. My parents, who I met later in life, became good friends with Mike's parents, and we first met at a family dinner we were all invited to. Mike made the first move, and that's how our dating began. After a year and a half of dating, when we decided to marry, both sets of parents were thrilled. Everyone around us congratulated us, saying we were a perfect match. At that time, my close sister Flora also attended from afar, bringing along her then 1-year-old daughter Gloria, and I remember feeling so happy. 5 years later, I was still living with Mike, busy with work. Mike would say he's busy with work, coming home late on weekdays, and increasingly, his precious weekends were spent working. With Mike off and away, I found myself spending more time alone. I wish we had kids. That thought crossed my mind, and I shook it off. Actually, not long after we got married, Mike dropped a bombshell on me. I, actually, can't have children. The hospital test results he showed me clearly stated that. Since when did you know? I knew before we got married. But I thought if I told you, you might not marry me. Please, Emily, I don't want our parents to know about this. Keep it a secret. Mike had always said he loved kids and wanted a daughter someday. Knowing that, I felt deeply sorry for him at that moment. We'll take care of each other instead of having kids. Let's live our lives together. With those words from Mike, I nodded and resigned myself to giving up on the idea of having children. Now, 5 years later, did Mike keep his word? No, he didn't. Saying he's busy and tired, leaving all the household chores to me despite being a dual-income couple, without ever showing appreciation, his attitude towards me turned increasingly cold. One day, I got a call from Flora. She had moved abroad with her husband right after our wedding, but now that his assignment was over, they were moving back, not too far from us. Gloria was now 6 years old. I had seen her in photos, but this would be our first real interaction since the wedding. I was looking forward to meeting Flora and Gloria again. That night, I tried to tell Mike, who came home late, about Flora's return. Welcome back, Mike. You know, I got a call from Flora today. I'm tired. I don't have time for small talk. Mike looked down at me coldly and quickly went to the bathroom. Left alone, I stood there, feeling lonely. Despite his aloof attitude towards me, Mike left all the troublesome matters for me to handle. Hey! We're going to have a birthday party for Mom. Dad asked me to prepare, so you take care of it. I was left puzzled when he unilaterally said that, but I went ahead and prepared for my mother-in-law, Helen's birthday party, squeezing it into my busy schedule. On the day of the birthday party, Mike, who attended, wore a proud smile as he saw Helen's joy.
This birthday party, I set it all up. All for my dear Mom. Dad, I did good, right?
Despite the fact that he had dumped everything on me, Mike had the audacity to claim the credit, which irked me a bit. However, after the birthday party was over, my father-in-law Nicholas and Helen thanked me. We know it was Emily who prepared everything. Thanks for doing this for Helen. Please continue to take good care of Mike. They were as kind to me as they had been since the day we got married. Despite my growing grievances with Mike, I was grateful for having met Nicholas and Helen. Sometime later, Mike's arrogant behavior only escalated. He wouldn't have a proper conversation with me, yet he always found something to complain about regarding the housework. One morning, an incident occurred.
Hey, Emily! What were you thinking?
Mike yelled at me, his face contorted with anger as I was getting ready to leave for work. What's wrong with you all of a sudden?
You didn't polish my shoes. How am I supposed to go to work like this?
Indeed, Mike had come home after I had gone to bed the previous night, so I hadn't polished his shoes. But, fed up with the mounting stress, I retorted.
They're your shoes. Why don't you take care of them yourself? Stop expecting me to do everything.
In the next moment, I felt a sharp pain on my cheek. It took a second to realize Mike had slapped me.
Mike, did you just hit me? Shut up. There's nothing wrong with disciplining my wife. If you don't want this to happen, do your job as a wife properly.
With that, Mike stormed out of the house. I was left clutching my cheek, collapsing onto the floor.
He's hardly home, acts cold, and now violence. This is too much.
That's when I began to question the meaning of my marriage to Mike. Yet, considering how happy our parents were when we married, and how kind Nicholas and Helen have been to me, I couldn't easily decide to divorce. One day, not long after she had returned from abroad, Flora asked, "Would you come to my daughter's Parents' Day?" Only 2 family members could attend, and Flora's husband couldn't make it because of work. I happily agreed, saying,
"I'll be there."
On the day of the Parents' Day, I went with Flora to Gloria's classroom. We waved back at Gloria, who was happily waving at us. Soon, the lesson started, and I watched from the back corner of the classroom. Then, a couple entered the classroom late. I was shocked when I glanced at them, because the dad was unmistakably Mike. He was there with a blonde woman, dressed flamboyantly, whispering and looking cozy as they started watching the class. I told Flora, and both of us, surprised, tried to stay out of sight from Mike for the time being. At that moment, I discreetly sent a message to someone. As the Parents' Day came to a close, the children started making their way over to their parents. Gloria ran over to Flora, and I bent down to ask her, "Do you know that man over there?"
That's Irene's dad. I saw his picture at their house when we went over to play.
Gloria had been abroad for so long that she didn't remember Mike's face since the wedding when she was 1. At that moment, I understood everything. So that's what it was. I will never forgive this. As Mike, the woman, and a child named Irene were about to leave the classroom, I blocked their path, forcing a smile in front of the child.
Hello. I hear Gloria has been getting along well with you. Thank you for that.
Mike looked at me, his face freezing over. The woman casually replied, "Hello."
Since the kids get along so well, let's all continue to be friendly, shall we? Family style.
Huh. Beside the puzzled woman, Mike started to tremble. Then Flora said, "Since the 2 want to play together, we'll take Irene with us." And quickly whispered something to me as she was leaving. As Flora and the children walked away, it left me, Mike, and the woman. "Come on, Mike, let's go," Johanna said. Yes, excuse us," Mike responded, trying to act like a stranger. I grabbed Mike's arm with a smile, still.
Huh? What are you doing with my husband? And who are you?
I then introduced myself with a serious face. Sorry for the late introduction. I'm Emily. His wife, you know? The woman's face turned pale as she realized the situation. They tried to dash away. But having been in track and field during my school days, I easily caught up and stopped them. At the school gate, Mike gasped.
What? Dad, Mom too?
Yes, the person I emailed during Parents' Day was Nicholas. I had sent him a message asking him to come quickly to Gloria's school. Seeing Nicholas and Helen, Mike gave up trying to escape and collapsed. Nicholas, Helen, and I put Mike and the woman in the car and headed to the in-laws' house. In the living room of the in-laws' house, with the two seated side by side, I confronted them. "So, why were you at Parents' Day?"
It was nothing. She's just an acquaintance. A single mother who asked me to act as a father figure, nothing more."
"But Gloria mentioned there are family photos of you at her house. Do you usually take family photos with just acquaintances? You don't need to lie so blatantly." Mike, resigning himself, began to explain. The woman's name was Johanna. He had been involved with her before we met. Johanna worked at a night bar, and thinking Nicholas and Helen wouldn't approve, he kept it hidden. After introducing me to his parents, he broke off the relationship with Johanna. But right after we got engaged, Johanna contacted him saying, "I gave birth to your child." After seeing Irene, I couldn't help but go back to Johanna. I found her so adorable. That's when I asked something that had been bothering me. "You can't have children, right? That medical report was real, wasn't it?"
That's because..."
Mike began to reveal something shocking. Right before our marriage, Johanna had told him, "Don't have children with anyone but this child." And so, Mike had gone through with a vasectomy.
"For such a selfish reason, you made me give up on having children. Do you understand how I felt?"
Johanna laughed at my angry reproach. "Shut up, loser. Mike loves me. You are just a pity marriage." When I asked, "Is that true, Mike?" he nodded. "I married Mike because Nicholas and Helen liked me, and our parents got along well. I was efficient, took care of the house and personal matters perfectly. So he only ever saw me as a maid." "So, a maid, huh? But now that it's out, there's no helping it. I'll divorce you. I have a woman I love and a lovely daughter. You're no longer needed." That's when Nicholas, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Did you forget why Emily's parents and we got along so well?"
"Huh?"
The truth was, both our parents owned businesses and were in a cooperative relationship. Currently, Nicholas's company's most important client was the company where I now serve as a department head, owned by my parents. You might not know since you were sent to work at a friend's company for training, but if we lose the business with Emily's company, we won't survive. It was then revealed that Nicholas had always told Mike, "You'll take over someday, so keep up with the company's affairs." But Mike, not taking it seriously, was unaware that my parents' company was the most crucial client.
So, I intended to leave the company to you, but now there may not be a company to inherit. More importantly, we're disowning you. I never want to see the face of such a foolish son again."
As Nicholas declared disownment, Mike started to panic, begging Nicholas and Helen. But Nicholas and Helen firmly refused him. At that moment, I received an email on my mobile phone. Checking it, I smirked. "So, Johanna, how's Irene's real dad doing?"
"Huh?"
I confronted them with a photo of Johanna, heavily pregnant and looking cozy in a childbirth class with a brown-haired man unknown to me. "You seemed quite close to this man during your pregnancy. Where did he go?"
How do you have that?"
I explained that when Flora took the children away, I had asked her to gather any information she could on this woman. Flora, using her network of mom friends, managed to get this photo. According to her mom friend, this man used to accompany her to every prenatal checkup. I thought he was the new husband Mike knew about. Hearing this, Johanna's face grew paler and paler. Mike was visibly shaken by the photo. No wonder, since the man in the picture and Irene looked remarkably alike.
"Hey, Johanna! What's going on? This man looks exactly like Irene."
When I pressed her to tell the truth, Johanna seemed to resign herself and began to speak. She admitted to two-timing while with Mike, and said that she got pregnant right after they broke up, but after the child was born, they had a big fight, and he left. She thought it would be best to claim the child was Mike's, the prospective company president's, to monopolize Nicholas's inheritance, so she convinced Mike to have a vasectomy.
"You're kidding!" I believed in you and became incapable of having kids.
Mike shook Johanna's shoulders in disbelief, but she just turned pale and said nothing. Then Mike approached me.
I'm sorry, Emily. I was deceived by this woman. You said you'd stay with me even if we couldn't have kids. Let's start over. I only love you.
Huh? Didn't you just say I was no longer needed? Who's the maid? Mike was at a loss for words, so I declared.
We're getting a divorce. And I'll be suing both of you for adultery, so be prepared.
As Mike broke down crying, I told him.
Never show your face to me again.
I left Mike and Johanna to their ugly argument and walked away. Eventually, my divorce from Mike was finalized. I received $40,000 in alimony from Mike and $20,000 from Johanna. Nicholas and Helen, having disowned Mike and deeply apologized, persuaded my parents to continue the business dealings. They informed the president of the company Mike was supposed to inherit that they were leaving Mike's fate in their hands. Consequently, Mike, who had never been serious at work, was fired. Johanna moved away with her child and returned to night work, likely struggling with debts incurred from paying me alimony. After separating from Johanna and depleting his savings, jobless Mike lived alone in a showerless apartment, desperately job hunting. As for me, 3 years after leaving Mike, I remarried a sincere man I met through work, who treats me kindly, and we were blessed with the child I had always wished for. We're now looking forward to meeting our baby, enjoying each day happily. Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital? In the middle of the night, 8-year-old Owen came to our house. Moreover, he was limping in pain. It's over an hour's walk for an adult to our place. What on earth happened? Looking closer, various parts of his body were scraped, and he was bleeding. Exhausted and in pain, Owen's eyes were vacant, as if he might collapse at any moment.
Absolutely not.
My husband shouted at the innocent child. He was very angry and went somewhere. And then, I was shaken to my core by my husband's unexpected action. I am Kate, 60 years old. I lived with my husband, Raymond. Our son and his wife lived in the next town, about an hour's walk from our house, making a car essential for travel. Phil's wife, Linda, is 6 years younger than him, and they have an 8-year-old grandson, Owen. Until now, Phil often brought Owen to our house, so I had been taking care of Owen since he was a baby. On the other hand, Linda rarely came over and had told Phil, "Bring him here." However, it seems Linda has been devoted to housework and childcare, wanting to make some free time for her from now on. Moreover, Phil said, Linda is very domestic and takes good care of us, satisfied with their current family situation. There's no way to intervene, even as a mom. I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected. I told myself, letting them do as they wished. But I had no idea such a tragedy would strike us later. It was when Phil was promoted and decided to work abroad half a year ago. Phil, who hates being away from his family, wanted to leave Japan with his family. However, Linda objected.
Owen has just started elementary school and has friends. It's cruel to make him transfer.
Of course, Phil tried to persuade her. But Linda insisted, and with a heavy heart, he left for abroad alone. And sadly, at the same time, Owen stopped coming to our house. I have repeatedly asked Linda to let Owen visit, but each time she made up excuses to refuse. Still not giving up, I pleaded over the phone just to see him for a moment. Then Linda, raising her voice, ranted at me.
It's hard enough without Phil. I can't stand having to worry about you too. Are you trying to monitor me?
No, that's not it at all. Just a short time at the doorstep, I just want to see Owen's face.
Don't you understand I don't want that? If you keep pestering me, I'll tell Phil and have him scold you.
After saying that, Linda abruptly hung up. Sigh, it seems like nothing will help. Maybe that's just how a son's wife is. Phil had emailed me that his new job was demanding, cutting into his sleep time. Not wanting to cause Phil any more worry, I decided to wait to see Owen until Phil returned home. And before I knew it, more than half a year had passed since I last saw Owen. Raymond and I, missing seeing Owen's face, looked at his photos every day to distract ourselves. Raymond's favorite was a group photo from Owen's entrance ceremony. According to Raymond, Owen's anxious face was adorable. One evening, just as the clock struck 9 p.m., the sound of the house doorbell rang suddenly, so I opened the front door. "Can you lend me some money to go to the hospital?" What a surprise, 8-year-old Owen had come.
What happened to you?
"My leg hurts, and I can't sleep at night, so I decided to go to the hospital myself. But this is all I have." When Owen slowly opened his palm, there were 3 dimes. Apparently, he had walked here, dragging his leg in pain, for over an hour. "I fell on the way," said Owen, whose knees were scraped and bleeding. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't understand. I decided to slowly listen to his story and invited Owen into the house for now. Then, at that moment, Raymond, who had been silent until then, suddenly spoke up.
Absolutely not. What are you saying? Are you out of your mind? Owen is in so much trouble.
Angry at Raymond's cold attitude, I grabbed his sweater with both hands and shook him. However, Raymond pulled my hands away with great force and, with a face like a demon, left the house without saying anything. "It's because I came. I'm sorry. I'll go home now." Owen, completely shrunken, turned his back on me and reached for the doorknob. "Owen, don't worry about Grandpa. I'll take you to the hospital myself, so no need to worry." I immediately called an ambulance and at the same time, I called Linda. But I couldn't get through to her, and my texts weren't even read. 20 minutes later, while all this was happening, the paramedics finally arrived. Owen was taken to a nearby hospital, and I accompanied him. Afterwards, Owen was diagnosed with a fracture by the doctor. He was treated and instructed to rest at home. What is Linda doing at a time like this? Even at this point, I couldn't get in touch with Linda, so I decided to take Owen back to our house. "Would you like something warm to drink? You used to like tea with honey, didn't you? I'll prepare it now, so please sit in that chair and wait." As soon as we arrived home, I filled the kettle with water and turned on the stove. Then, Owen suddenly came close to me. "Oh dear, you should be sitting still." "It's not that, Grandma. You see." At this moment, I was told an astonishing truth by Owen. Owen, having confessed everything, had big tears in his eyes. "So that's what happened. It must have been hard for you. But you can rest easy now." I hugged him gently, as if wrapping him in warmth. And then, I was informed of a certain event by an unexpected person.
Those who made Owen go through this will not get away with it.
A flame of revenge ignited within me. The next day at noon. Finally, Linda answered the phone. "Owen has fractured his leg and was seen at the hospital. Now, he's at our place. Apparently, resting at home and eating nutritious food will help him heal faster." Then, "Kate, please continue to take care of Owen for a while. You must be happy to be able to look after Owen so much since you haven't been able to see him until now, right?" I just said, "Understood," and hung up. I had no intention of sending Owen back to that house. Even if Linda had said, "I'm coming to pick up the child now," I planned to keep Owen with me by any means, so Linda's response was exactly what I wanted. However, I felt anger at her attitude as a mother. But I didn't want to get unnecessarily confrontational and spoil the plan. In the meantime, as I supported Owen, I ran around preparing for retaliation, and finally, everything was ready. "All right, watch out. Today, right here, I'll bring you down." A week after Owen came to stay with us, I left him at home to look after himself for a bit while I, accompanied by someone, made a surprise visit to Linda's place.
What is this about? showing up out of the blue. Please, just go home.
I had gotten a key to their house from Owen. Ignoring Linda's protests, I began to look around the room.
Was someone here just before we arrived?
I noticed that, although the room was generally tidy, the sheets on the bed in the bedroom were unusually disheveled.
Enough of this. I'll call the police if I have to.
Oh, Linda, you really think you're in any position to say that?
I've heard everything from Owen. Leaving him all alone while you're out at night, I see.
He was told not to tell anyone. What Owen had tearfully told me before was about this very issue. According to him, one day, feeling lonely and scared because he was sick, he tried to stop Linda from going out at night by standing in the doorway with his arms outstretched.
But you just pushed him aside and left anyway. He hurt his ankle when he fell.
Linda always told Owen.
Don't you dare tell Dad or anyone about what happens at home, or you'll go without food.
But that day, unable to bear the pain any longer, Owen thought, maybe Grandpa and Grandma can help somehow. So, relying on his memory, he limped all the way to our house.
If you have money for luxury brands, you should at least take Owen to the hospital.
When I opened the closet, it was packed with obviously expensive bags and clothes. Owen had confided in me.
Mom always has nice clothes and bags, but she doesn't care about me.
It was clear Linda's possessions were all high-end and flashy.
The loneliness without Phil, you're trying to fill it with shopping. That's also on your son, you know.
Linda, veins throbbing with anger, pointed her finger at me. Then, suddenly, a low voice boomed from behind me.
Shut up! I've seen the affair with my own eyes.
The voice belonged unmistakably to Raymond. He had stormed Linda's home with me. That day Owen came to us seeking help.
Not lending it!
Raymond had shouted before storming off, leaving me initially infuriated. However, his anger was actually directed at Linda. Overwhelmed by fury, he had blurted out without thinking. Raymond had headed straight for Linda's house after leaving ours.
I saw you getting into a car driven by a man at that very moment. And I knew he was Owen's first-grade teacher.
Raymond had memorized the face of the teacher who had been in charge of Owen's class from looking at the school photo every day. After Owen revealed the truth to us, we were informed about Linda's secret rendezvous with Owen's former teacher.
I heard from the affair partner that you always dressed provocatively for parent-teacher meetings and aggressively flirted with him.
I confronted the former teacher based on Raymond's testimony. The affair partner admitted that despite knowing it was wrong, he gave in to Linda's temptations when Owen moved to a different class. The former teacher expressed remorse and readily agreed to pay the compensation. He had already submitted his resignation and promised never to see Linda again, planning to return to his hometown.
You stayed in Japan because you couldn't bear to part with him under the guise of for the child's sake, didn't you? Well, that's...
Linda faltered, caught off guard. I assumed that she hadn't taken Owen to the hospital after pushing him because she feared being discovered. And perhaps she thought Phil would cut her allowance if he found out, which is why she didn't take Owen to the hospital. Then, likely because I had accurately pinpointed the truth. Linda couldn't hide her agitation. However, after a brief pause, she defiantly claimed,
If I beg Phil, he'll surely forgive me.
Ha, he really loves me.
Linda, enough is enough. Phil, when did you get back?
Phil, having been informed by me, had hurried back to verify the truth with his own eyes. Believing Linda wouldn't show her true self in his presence, he secretly observed everything from the shadows.
I've heard it all. I can't forgive you. Your behavior towards Dad and Mom is too appalling. I want a divorce. Wait a minute. It was just a lapse in judgment. Plus, Owen is only 8. He needs his mom. I just visited Owen at the hospital, and he's made it clear he doesn't need a mom like you.
Even after receiving such a decisive blow from Phil, Linda desperately begged for reconciliation. But Phil steadfastly refused. Linda then turned to me with a fierce look, baring her teeth.
You've made him leave me because of your meddling. How do you plan to take responsibility for this? That's on you. Besides, I heard you've always seen Phil as nothing but an ATM.
I had been sniffing around Linda, checking if she had any secrets by going through the wedding guest list and making calls.
And I'll be sure to inform your parents about all of this, so be prepared. Stop! My dad hates dishonesty. If he finds out about this, I'll be disowned. Then who will take care of me?
You're an adult. Why not work for yourself?
No way! I've been living a comfortable housewife life on Phil's salary. I don't want to work now. It's too humiliating.
Faced with Linda's selfishness, both Raymond and Phil were dumbfounded, speechless.
You'd better experience some hardship and reflect on your actions.
Can't you do something? I'm sorry. I really am remorseful. You're the only one I can turn to now. Finally, Linda begged for forgiveness through her tears. However, I simply looked at her coldly, without giving any response. Perhaps thinking she had no other options left. She started to cry out.
I'm so sorry. Please help me.
Right there and then.
You know, Owen sought your help many times too. But you ignored all his pleas.
Thinking only of yourself is really convenient, isn't it? Hearing my words, Linda broke down crying, but I was unmoved and threw her out of the house. After that, Phil and Linda's divorce was finalized, and Linda was ordered to pay $30,000 in alimony. We also claimed $10,000 from her affair partner, the former teacher. But Linda, having drained her savings, got a job at a night bar only to be fired soon after due to her selfish nature. Currently, she's juggling jobs in road construction and cleaning. Phil still has to work abroad but has promised to return home whenever possible to see Owen. Until Phil returns, we, as a couple, have taken it upon ourselves to care for Owen. Filling the gap of the time we couldn't see him, watching Owen grow has brought true happiness to Raymond and me. Then, don't leave the TV on, and either turn off the lights in the living room or your room. Got it, got it. I'll make sure to save energy. I was leaving the house to go shopping far away. Whether I was out or at home, everyone in the family was committed to saving energy, such as not forgetting to turn off lights or setting the air conditioner to the right temperature. Today, as usual, I went out after reminding each other in the family. However, when I returned a few hours later, my beloved home had completely changed.
If you love saving that much, I'll save energy for you.
The malicious laughter of my sister-in-law echoed. She had sneaked in and turned off our home's main breaker, causing a major problem. The reason she did such a thing was, my name is Nicola. I'm 29 years old, living in my in-laws' house after marrying James, who is the same age as me. My mother-in-law has passed away, and my father-in-law, David, who has a chronic respiratory condition, was living alone in his house. Concerned about his health, James persuaded me to move in and live together while I continued to work. In the in-laws' house, there's also Amelia, James's unmarried sister, with whom I've had a hard time getting along. David is gentle and kind, much like James. On the other hand, Amelia has a rough temperament and is prone to emotional ups and downs. Being straightforward, I've had several clashes with her, and it's been somewhat of an effort to keep her in check since I'm a few years older. Aside from Amelia, it was a peaceful life. However, within half a year, David's illness worsened. He needed an oxygen concentrator to stay at home. Since both Amelia and I were working, we couldn't be there during the day to help David if needed. We should have arranged for him to move into a care facility for a more secure living environment, but David refused to leave the in-laws' house filled with memories of my mother-in-law. After consulting with James, we concluded that forcibly moving David would be detrimental to his health and cruel. So, we decided to hire a home caregiver, but problems arose here too. Not only did Amelia have a bad relationship with me, but she also disliked the idea of strangers entering her home, and started harassing the caregiver. Moreover, she hurled insults and made sarcastic comments out of our sight. She interfered with their work and claimed that if they did not meet her expectations, they were unfit to care for David, repeatedly complaining to the agency. We were distressed, having several caregivers quit, but when we found out the cause, it was too late. The agency informed us they could no longer send anyone, leaving us abandoned.
What do we do now? Other companies have turned us down too. We're probably blacklisted. Damn it! All because of Amelia.
Known for causing trouble, we couldn't hope for any more home caregivers. We sighed and had no choice but to think of a solution. Amelia was inherently selfish and isolated from the family. James, as her brother, tried to correct her behavior, but it only led to fierce arguments, and he even told her to move out and live independently. However, Amelia was infuriated by being scolded in such a manner and started lashing out at me, easier to confront than James.
You're married now, so Nicola should take care of it. My brother can't quit his job because he's a man, but you're different.
Hearing this, James would argue with Amelia again. This situation didn't allow David to focus on his recovery. I didn't like complying with Amelia's demands, but there was no choice. David, despite his illness, always tried to be cheerful and made efforts so I wouldn't feel out of place. Feeling indebted to David, I said, "I'll quit my job to take care of David. I'll start studying caregiving bit by bit. After all, David is family to me." Deciding to retire for caregiving, David and James expressed their gratitude with tears. Caregiving was completely new to me, and it was hard at first, but David always encouraged me gently. The only thing that didn't change was Amelia. She never moved out or helped with household chores or caregiving. On her days off, she would disappear to go out and have fun. Though I now have more time available, there's still the matter of caring for David and studying caregiving. James and I shared the household chores, but whenever there were imperfections, Amelia was quick to criticize.
Oh, wasn't it Nicola who decided to take on both caregiving and housework? You like doing everything by yourself, don't you?
If I retorted even slightly, she'd hit back with sarcasm. She harassed me this way, but James and the others would quickly find out and scold her repeatedly. Each time, she would play the victim, saying, "Dad's too kind to say anything.
I'm just speaking up on his behalf."
Of course, there was no improvement, and her interference only served to interrupt my work, quickly leading to stress accumulation. I'm truly grateful to the home caregivers who managed to smile through Amelia's persistent behavior. Not just me, but David and the others were also weary of Amelia's stubborn attitude. However, on a day James and I were discussing how to encourage her independence. "I've got a fiancé now, so I'm moving out. Bye, Dad. I'll come back to visit sometimes." With that, Amelia left the house quite abruptly. We were stunned, but with her departure, the atmosphere at home stabilized. Although there was talk of David moving to a care facility due to his age and condition, I was getting accustomed to caregiving, so we decided to continue with it at home. Amelia, now living with her fiancé's family, frequently returned to her childhood home. "There'll be leftovers from dinner tonight, right? Put them in a storage container. I'll take them home with me." It seemed she was relying on our leftovers to avoid preparing meals for her fiancé. Her selfish nature was intact, treating me like a housekeeper as before.
"Amelia, don't order Nicola around without offering to help yourself."
Yeah, sorry, Nicola."
"All right then, hurry up with dinner, will you?"
David's admonishments seemed to go unheard, merely brushed aside. To be honest, the amount of food I prepared hadn't changed since she left, so that wasn't really an issue. The real problem was the increased expenses on groceries and utilities. Despite moving out, Amelia stopped contributing financially but frequently returned to do as she pleased, leading to higher outlays. Moreover, she had no concept of saving energy or money.
"Amelia, please turn off the lights in rooms you're not using. And about the shower, can I use it first if you're not going to?"
Amelia was lounging on the couch, her back to the TV that was left on, engrossed in her mobile phone game. She had turned on all the lights in the bathroom and dressing area, intending to take a shower, but showed no signs of moving. Her lingering here was causing a delay for others. When asked to decide between gaming or showering, Amelia glared at me irritably. Fine, fine. I was about to go now. Can you not bother me? Always on about saving and conserving, are you dumb? It's not like it makes that much of a difference, being so stingy over small things.
Amelia, watch your language.
Yeah, sorry. David scolded, and she retorted. Finally, Amelia turned off the TV and headed to the bathroom. She complained, but at least she listened to what we said. Though being years into her career and engaged, her attitude remained that of a rebellious teenager. I had long stopped expecting her to act her age. Though it was not a concern, my relationship with Amelia remained tense, even after she left home. I thought saving and conserving could be a common ground for our family, but that proved difficult. One day, I was driving to a large shopping mall in the suburbs. I was tasked by David with running errands. David isn't unable to go out, but he needs to carry a portable oxygen tank when he does. For David, in his old age, carrying a heavy tank was bothersome, even if it had a carrier, and moreover it was all too visible with the nasal cannula. Tired of being pitted every time he met someone he knew, David preferred staying home. David asked for us to run errands for him many times, but James usually took care of these tasks when he was home. I was careful not to leave David alone, but this time our schedules didn't align, and I had to leave David behind. I was worried, but it's not like David couldn't manage on his own. He needed the tank because breathing didn't come easily, but he could still do a lot on his own. While it's important to save electricity, I asked him to use the air conditioning as needed, and with that, I headed out to shop. After completing the shopping without any issues, I returned to our home's parking lot a few hours later. It was late afternoon, although I had left in the late morning. Before entering the house, I checked my mobile phone. Sometimes James contacts me about dinner plans. But what I saw on the screen surprised me. There were countless missed calls. The callers were James, David, and the general hospital David attends. A cold sweat broke out on my back. When driving, I switched my phone to a mode where it wouldn't ring. Planning to return quickly today, I forgot to switch it back before shopping, and hadn't realized calls were coming in. A sense of foreboding washed over me. I tried to call James first, but the phone just rang multiple times without connecting. Growing more anxious, I tried David's number next, but there was no response there either. Finally, clinging to a sliver of hope, I called the hospital. A receptionist answered, and trying to suppress my panic, I inquired about David. He's currently admitted. We can't discuss details over the phone, so could you please come in? After being transferred through several departments, I was informed of this and became paralyzed. I quickly replied that I was on my way, hurriedly turned the car key, and restarted the engine. In the car, I was frantic. As if materializing my fears, the roads were congested. David had been fine when I left, waving me off as usual. Why would he suddenly need to be hospitalized? I deeply regretted leaving him alone. Upon arriving at the hospital, I was directed to David's room. Walking down the increasingly tense corridor, I quietly opened the door to find James already seated there. We looked at each other in surprise. However, James explained that he was at the hospital first, waiting for David's tests, which is why he couldn't answer the phone. I too had been driving, unable to respond to calls. Sorry for not answering the phone. No, it's okay. So, how is David doing? Prompted by him, I looked over at David sleeping in the bed. His complexion seemed a bit off, but the breathing sounds I was worried about seemed steady. It's okay, there's no issue with his condition. He's just admitted for some tests. Actually, hearing from James that David wasn't in danger finally put me at ease. So, why was David admitted? Just as I was about to ask this question, the door to the room burst open. It was Amelia, rushing in. Her eyes were filled with terror, ignoring us and rushing straight to David's bedside. Seeing him lying there, she screamed loudly.
Ah! What has happened to Dad?
James hurried to calm her down. But her panicked cries continued to echo in the room.
Please, calm down.
James tried to pull her away from the bed. Her voice, initially fearful, gradually quieted down, but then she suddenly turned to me, glaring and shouting with raw emotion.
You were with him. What happened?
Her accusations struck me, leaving me speechless. James intervened to calm things down, but her anger was still directed at me. Confused, I was caught in a strange sensation. David needed oxygen, but such a sudden hospitalization seemed unlikely.
Wait. Can't we talk about this calmly?
James turned back to us with a quiet tone, starting to explain what he knew. David was transported here because the oxygen concentrator's power was cut off. After I left, David was sleeping in his room when the power went off. He woke up feeling suffocated and tried to turn the machine back on, but it wouldn't work, and he couldn't reach me or James. David connected himself to a portable tank to catch his breath, but was anxious about waiting alone without knowing when we would return. David, struggling with a headache, decided to go to the hospital, but since we usually drove, he had no way to get there. He then attempted to call a taxi, but his hands trembled so much that even making a call became difficult. So, David went to ask a neighbor to call a taxi for him. Upon stepping outside, the neighbor screamed at the sight of David. They took him to the living room, laid him down, and applied copious amounts of ice while calling an ambulance. It was then that David realized he was suffering from heat stroke. Thanks to timely treatment at the hospital, his condition stabilized and he was safe. According to what James heard from the doctor, David, perhaps due to his age, had a diminished ability to feel heat, and he didn't realize that his trembling hands and headache were symptoms of heat stroke, rather than old age. He also had convulsions, so immediate treatment and hospitalization were necessary. Hearing James's explanation, I couldn't help but express my doubts.
The power for the device not coming on. It's hard to believe the plug could have come loose. We installed it in a place where it couldn't be accidentally unplugged, right?
James frowned, deep in thought. Amelia remained silent. However, her face was visibly pale.
That's correct. It couldn't have come unplugged on its own. I went back to check, and indeed, the plug was still in. Then how?
I was even more confused by James's words. He had returned home to prepare for the hospital stay, and noticed the power was off, but the plug was still connected. He then looked sternly at Amelia. Her pallor suggested she was hiding something, but it was unclear why James was so angry. Suddenly, James raised his voice at Amelia.
You turned off the breaker, didn't you? Say something.
As James's voice echoed in the room, Amelia started trembling, struggling to speak but only managing to utter incoherent sounds. Then James took something out of his pocket. The hospital had tried to contact me, James, and Amelia several times, but James was the first to connect. Returning home to prepare, James immediately felt something was off upon entering. He was greeted by an unbelievable heat wave. Noticing the hall light didn't work, James checked around the house and found all appliances stopped. Rushing to the breaker, he found it switched to OFF, as he suspected. James was stunned and suspicious. Why would this happen? There was no report of lightning or any incident that could cause the breaker to trip. Other homes were unaffected, with no reports of power outages. However, James remembered something important. Our home had several security cameras installed. This was before I married James, insisted by David after a burglary, for his wife's peace of mind. Despite our commitment to saving, the cameras were kept for our safety. The footage before the power outage should be available. Rushing to restore power, James checked the records. I've got the footage here.
I wanted to show both of you, so I transferred it.
James took out his mobile phone in the hospital room and showed us the transferred footage. The first scene was our familiar home entrance. Some time after I left, Amelia made her appearance. It was the first time I knew she had come to the house, and I couldn't help but glance at her next to me. She used her own key to open the front door and enter. The usual noise was absent. Instead, she looked around, as if searching for something. It was almost as if she was checking to see if I wasn't there. James started operating his mobile phone, now switching to the footage from a camera inside the entrance. Our home's circuit breaker is located near the ceiling of the shoe cabinet. Amelia climbed onto the chair placed for sitting while wearing shoes and opened the cover of the breaker.
What are you doing?
Even though I knew what was happening, I couldn't suppress such a scream. The camera had a voice recognition system that starts recording when it detects sound, so it recorded not just the sounds of Amelia moving but also her chilling whispers.
This is the breaker, right? If the fridge stops, that penny pincher will calm down a bit, won't she?
A maliciously laughing voice echoed in the quiet, silent hospital room.
Look, I'm saving energy, just like you love to do.
After she turned off the breaker, the footage ended. We were at a loss for words, standing frozen in place. Turning off the breaker would, of course, stop the power supply throughout the house. For the several hours until James noticed, the contents of the fridge must have turned into a disaster, just as she planned. From the way she rushed into the hospital room, it seemed she hadn't realized her actions could endanger David's life, but to punish me, it was too cruel. Yet, she took an action I could never have imagined.
I did it because you're always nagging about saving energy.
She started to raise her voice in an attempt to justify herself, tears welling up in her eyes.
I didn't know Dad was home. I thought you went out together. It's your fault for leaving him behind. I didn't think this would happen,
she repeated. Contrary to her tearful self-defense, my heart was ablaze with anger.
Sneaking in like a thief and turning off the breaker, it's miraculous he survived. If something had happened to David,
I couldn't help but blame Amelia, but she raised her voice even louder to blame me.
But it's your fault. You shouldn't have left Dad. It's all because of you.
Her accusation pierced my heart. Indeed, I shouldn't have left David behind. Leaving him behind, saying that going far would be a burden, was perhaps my mistake. As the hospital room filled with tension, suddenly it was shattered.
Quiet down.
David, who we thought had been asleep, rebuked her. He couldn't raise his voice much due to his illness. Being naturally gentle, we were all shocked. All three of us turned our gazes to him.
Do you understand what you've done? Causing trouble for everyone, almost killing your father. Nicola isn't to blame.
David's eyes were filled with anger and disappointment. His tone was much stricter than his usual gentle demeanor. Woken up by Amelia's screaming and the commotion, he had woken up and heard everything, including the surveillance camera footage.
If you're going to keep making noise, leave. And don't ever come back to the house.
After being scolded, Amelia turned pale, frozen in place, but then she suddenly started crying. And rather loudly, which was very annoying. Amelia was apologizing to David, but James said, "Leave, you're a nuisance." And she was driven out of the hospital room. David was discharged just a few days later. When James and I went to pick him up from the hospital, he greeted us with a relieved smile, apparently feeling better. But upon returning home, Amelia was waiting at the entrance. She hadn't shown herself to us since that incident. We were expecting an apology, but what came out of her mouth were the same words as before.
It's your fault. Everything that happened to Dad is all because of you.
David and James could only wear expressions of utter disbelief. David stepped forward towards Amelia, unwilling to admit fault and still trying to push the blame onto me.
Be grateful we're not taking you to the police just because you're family. Your actions are absolutely unforgivable.
David's cold voice, unchanged even outside the hospital room, made her fall silent. But David didn't stop there. He had come to despise her from the bottom of his heart.
I'm disowning you. I can't believe you still don't understand the seriousness of what you've done. As I said at the hospital, never come to our house again."
With those harsh words, he brushed past Amelia and entered the house. She probably never imagined being disowned by her father. She stood there, dumbfounded. We sided with David's anger, deciding to support him. So, we left her outside and went back into the house. Afterward, Amelia sent numerous apologies. But David ignored them all. Having been caused so much trouble, we had no sympathy for her and maintained our stance. David had been asked to financially support Amelia's wedding and honeymoon, but he refused all requests and firmly stated he would not attend the wedding. One day, I was ambushed outside our house by her. She desperately apologized and pleaded with me to persuade David, but I had already decided not to forgive her. Knowing ignoring her would only make her more persistent, I quietly listened to everything Amelia had to say, then left her there and walked away. This series of events eventually became known to Amelia's fiancé. David had declined attending the wedding for safety reasons, but the fiancé, puzzled by this, reached out to David. It turned out she had twisted the story to suit herself, but upon hearing about the breaker incident that led to David's emergency transport, the fiancé apologized to David in a panicked frenzy. The fiancé was sensible, unlike Amelia. Calling her actions akin to attempted murder, their marriage was ultimately called off. The lease for their new home was cancelled before they could move in. Amelia was kicked out of the fiancé's house, but she had already quit her job in anticipation of getting married. Thanks to expenses on beauty treatments and salons in preparation for the wedding, her savings were nearly gone. And with the wedding venue already booked for the imminent event, she had to cover half of the cancellation fees. She ended up struggling with debt due to her own actions, but thankfully didn't show up at our place anymore. Meanwhile, the three of us have been living peacefully. Perhaps because we're no longer being disturbed and hurt by Amelia, David's condition has improved more than before. While we can't be careless because of his age, it seems we won't need to consider nursing home admission for a while. In fact, we're even planning a trip.
"My Emily is the cutest in the venue, isn't she?"
Daniel said with a laugh, addressing Emily. Even though I'm right in front of them, this is how they treat me. It seems nothing but a joke to me. Then Emily, seeing me, burst out laughing.
"What? Your wife is ugly."
That's it, I can't take it anymore. I'm calling off the marriage. I said that straight to Daniel. My name is Addison. I'm turning 29 this year. I've always loved numbers, and now I work in general affairs. I think this job suits my serious nature. Currently, I'm intensely studying for a qualification. The man I was supposed to marry is named Daniel. I met Daniel at a party. I had never been in a relationship with a man before. I lacked confidence and couldn't initiate conversations with men. As my friends began marrying off, I started attending parties in a rush. That's when I got accustomed to parties and met Daniel. My first impression of Daniel was that he was cool and refreshing. When we talked at the party, I enjoyed conversing with him a lot. Daniel, an elite at a major pharmaceutical company, is the same age as me. Even his academic background is impeccable. Yet, he's unpretentious and always brings up fun topics. I mistook his familiarity with women as just an act at first. Eventually, we became a couple. I was surprised that I could become a couple with him. I thought I had used up all my luck and love for being chosen by such a wonderful person. When we became a couple, he smiled at me and said, "I'm so glad you chose me. I'm such a lucky guy." But really, I was the one chosen by him. So I said, "I'm super happy too. But why did you choose me?" I asked him. I was genuinely insecure about being a match for someone as great as him. But he just laughed and replied, "I like girls who aren't experienced with guys and seem pure. You're my ideal." "Then that's great. Looking forward to being with you," I said, smiling back at him. After that, he regularly asked me out on dates. On our third date, he confessed, and we started dating. Half a year later, he proposed. I liked him, so I immediately said yes. That's great. Let's be happy together, he said with a smile. Living for 29 years, I had finally grasped happiness. I would become even happier after getting married. I believed so. But my expectations crumbled to nothing. Because after we got engaged and started living together, he changed. While dating. Addison, you're really cute. My princess. He always praised me with a smile. But now, that's a thing of the past. Lately, he's always belittling me. For instance, the day after we started living together. I got up earlier than him that day and started preparing breakfast. I planned to do my makeup before leaving for work, so I was cooking without it. When breakfast was ready and set on the table, he woke up. I called out to him with a smile.
Good morning, Daniel. Breakfast is ready, let's eat together.
Then he, seeing me, yelled in surprise.
What an awful face you have. A woman without makeup in the morning isn't a woman. At least make yourself presentable,
he shouted, furrowing his brow. His eyes were like those looking at something filthy. In a panic, I retorted. I was going to do my makeup later. Isn't that too harsh? You used to call me cute before we got engaged. I was shocked by his words. But he just laughed and added insult to injury.
It was just flattery to get married. Honestly, any woman with a decent income who'd do as I say would have been fine,
he said, laughing. That's... I was so shocked that I dropped my fork. At that point, I wondered if I should really marry him, but we had already paid a deposit for the wedding venue. Besides, there was no guarantee of finding another partner if I let him go. I had no romantic prospects before meeting him. And maybe, just maybe, he might return to his kinder self. Holding on to that faint hope, I had no choice but to endure his harsh words. His behavior and words became increasingly unbearable. Especially concerning finances. He stopped contributing to our previously split living expenses.
Could you please contribute to the living expenses? It's tough for me to cover everything with my salary alone,
I pleaded with him on a day off. But he half-heartedly dismissed me.
The wedding costs a lot, right? I'm broke from that expense, so you could at least pay the living expenses.
However, he wasn't bearing the full cost of the wedding. There would be gift money, and his share of expenses should be less. No matter how I tried to convince him, he wouldn't listen. Moreover, he never helped with wedding preparations, even when I discussed the dress fittings. Even when I consulted about a dress meeting.
Why do I care about a dress? It's a woman's thing, right? You just decide whatever.
That's how he responded. And there were issues with his friends too. He seemed to have many friends, as his mobile phone frequently rang. Often, calls were from women I didn't know. When I questioned him, suspecting infidelity.
They're just friends. Jealousy is unattractive.
He dismissed it entirely. Unable to ask more, I was left in the dark until one night I overheard something shocking. It was when I woke up in the middle of the night. I usually slept with him in the bedroom, but that night, thirsty and awake, I noticed he wasn't there. I heard voices from the living room. He was on the phone. Daniel? I was about to open the door to the living room, but his words stopped me. Our apartment walls are thin, so conversations are usually audible. I wished I had married Emily, he said, laughing. And Emily's voice, loud enough through the phone, responded.
But you'll quit your job someday, right? I want someone who can really provide.
She laughed. Her voice was unbearably annoying. It was clear she was flirting with Daniel and aware of his attraction. But Daniel continued the call unfazed. It was really great when I was dating you. You're so cute. Should we get back together? Emily burst into laughter at his suggestion.
That would be sad for your fiancé, wouldn't it? Though I'm definitely cuter.
She laughed. Daniel continued to badmouth me with ease. I shed a tear at his cruelty and whispered quietly, so as not to be heard in the next room. Daniel, you never really loved me. I thought I could finally be happy. I cried, stifling my voice so he wouldn't notice. Unaware of me, they continued their sweet conversation. Their phone call was hellish for me to overhear. Why did I rush into this marriage? I muttered, crying. He was definitely cheating, and it seemed unlikely he'd return to the kind man he was before we lived together. But the wedding was only a week away. What should I do? I could only despair about the future. Then came the wedding day. Daniel and I were preparing in the dressing room. Our families had already entered the ceremony hall, leaving us alone. Just waiting for the attendant to arrive, we heard a knock. Come in, please. I invited them in, thinking it was the attendant. However, the person who entered the dressing room wasn't the attendant, but a woman in a pink dress.
Excuse me.
I froze at that familiar voice. It was the woman on the phone with Daniel that night. I instinctively knew it. As I stood there, stunned, Daniel spoke in an excited tone. Ah, if it isn't Emily. You made it here without getting lost, he said, patting Emily's head. I was baffled by his words and actions, and she looked at him and happily responded.
Daniel gave me the room number. But is this woman your marriage partner?
She laughed, looking at me. Yeah, that's right. Oh, really? Such a plain dress for the main character of the day. It's quite dull. She critically eyed my dress from top to bottom, irritated by her assertive words. I replied, This is the dressing room. The attendant will be here soon, so could you please leave now? I said to her in a stern tone. Then she quickly hid behind Daniel.
No way, jealousy? This woman is glaring at me. It's really scary. Daniel, help me.
She feigned fear. Addison, jealousy is unbecoming. She's an important person to me, don't be mean. He admonished me. He couldn't see her face behind his back, but she was smirking at me. Her flashy makeup and perfectly styled hair were apparent. She was probably around the same age as me. She spoke with a triumphant look at me.
Daniel really should have married me instead. You'll get bored of such a plain woman in 3 days, won't you?
She laughed. Indeed. I wouldn't choose a woman like this unless she had a decent income. She's not my type, he said, looking down on me. I remained silent on purpose. I thought I'd let them talk as they pleased for a bit longer. I clenched the hem of my dress.
I really wanted to marry you. Even if we can't be a real couple, you will always be the wife of my heart. Daniel, even if you're married, we'll always be together, right? Such an ugly woman is just for the money.
She laughed brightly.
That's right. We'll always be together. I'll quit my job and live off Addison's money with you.
He made an outrageous proposal to her. At that moment, I was on the verge of exploding. What did these two think of me? But they were oblivious to my anger.
Daniel, you're terrible to your wife. Are you proposing that because I'm cuter?
She asked him with upturned eyes. He nodded as if it were obvious.
My Emily is the cutest in the venue, right? What do you think of Addison's face, Emily?
Daniel asked with a sarcastic smile, turning to Emily. Despite my presence, this was how they treated me. It seemed nothing but a joke to me. Then Emily, seeing me, burst out laughing.
What? Your wife is ugly.
And she continued.
Poor Daniel, marrying such an ugly woman. I'll soothe you as your heart's wife,
she said, looking down on me with a laugh.
That's right, isn't it?
Daniel laughed too. That's it, I can't take it anymore. I'm calling off the marriage. I said that straight to Daniel. He, not taking me seriously. Really? If you cancel the marriage with me, you'll stay single forever. Because you're an unfixable ugly woman. He started laughing. Emily too.
Daniel, you're too honest. I'm laughing so hard, my stomach hurts.
She clutched her stomach, laughing uproariously. After laughing, Daniel said,
A woman like you should be grateful to get married. You'll support me with your money for life.
I felt a deep rage boiling inside me. Frustrated at myself for not seeing through such a person before the wedding. I clenched my fists, trying to endure. Emily, still laughing.
Well, the wedding ceremony is about to start, right? I have to go eat my share of the celebration money, so I'll head to the venue first.
She said and left the room. Shortly after, the attendant arrived. Seemingly unaware of the conversation in the dressing room, the attendant began preparations, congratulating us. Then the attendant started explaining the wedding. Daniel and I had chosen a restaurant wedding, starting with the reception. According to the attendant, we just had to follow the MC's lead. I listened quietly to the attendant's explanation. Daniel spoke to me nonchalantly.
Once the wedding is over and we're officially married, we'll be husband and wife. Your looks are a letdown, but I'll put up with it. After all, I have Emily.
I ignored his comment. I had no intention of listening to him anymore. I was done with this man. Daniel persisted.
Hey! Answer me.
But I continued to ignore him. All that was left was to exact revenge and denounce him and his actions. I felt a sense of mission burning within me. Then Daniel and I entered the wedding venue. The unsuspecting attendees gave us a generous round of applause. Of course, among them was Emily, smirking unpleasantly. We sat down, and the MC proceeded with the ceremony.
Let's start with the vows. First, the groom, Daniel.
Amidst thunderous applause, Daniel began speaking. I am overjoyed to marry Addison.
I vow to love only her for the rest of my life.
He looked at me with a smug face. All lies. Inside, I looked at him with a cold detachment. Amidst the applause, the MC continued.
Thank you. Now, a response from the bride, Addison, please.
I ignored the MC and remained silent. A murmur started spreading through the venue. My parents and friends looked worried.
Addison? Could we have your response, please?
The MC tried to proceed, albeit confused. Still, I remained silent. The venue became more unsettled. Everyone looked at me with concern. Impatient.
Addison, why are you silent? Just say something.
Daniel harshly said. But I kept quiet. The atmosphere in the venue turned decidedly strange. The in-laws looked at me with puzzled expressions. Enough was enough. I had gathered enough attention. I thought so and opened my mouth. Glancing sideways, I saw Daniel relieved that I was finally going to speak. I confirmed his face and momentarily smirked. It was too early for him to feel relieved. Then I began speaking.
I will not vow to love Daniel. I'm breaking up with him right now. What?
Daniel was stunned, and I casually played the voice recorder at maximum volume. Daniel and Emily's conversation filled the room.
I really wanted to marry Emily. Even if we can't be a real couple, Emily is the wife of my heart. Daniel, we'll always be together even if you're married, right? Such an ugly woman is just for the money.
The conversation from the dressing room earlier echoed through the venue. Previously, when Daniel was on the phone with Emily at night, I felt frustrated for not having proof of infidelity. So, I bought a voice recorder. I always carried it with me, and fortunately, I managed to record their conversation today. The crowd became even more agitated. My friends looked at Daniel with suspicion. My dad seemed ready to get up and punch Daniel, held back only by my mom. My mother-in-law looked like she might faint, and father-in-law John hurriedly supported her. Emily, sitting at a table with friends, was being glared at by those around her. She was sweating profusely and looked extremely uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the recording continued to play. In this chaotic situation, Daniel, confused, shouted,
Addison, what are you doing? Stop that voice recorder right now.
He tried to grab the recorder from me, but I swiftly dodged him. Then I shouted loudly,
There's no way I'll stop it. Everyone needs to know that Daniel is cheating with Emily over there.
I glared at Daniel. Unable to hold back anymore, Emily shouted from her table,
You're so sneaky. Just because you get to be Daniel's wife. The one Daniel truly cares about is cute me.
However, Emily's outburst caused the venue to buzz with a different energy, whispering among themselves. Everyone, regardless of age or gender. Seeing this, Emily began to panic.
What's going on, everyone? What's the matter?
I calmly told her,
Emily, sorry to interrupt your confident speech, but I think you're the ugliest person in this venue.
Someone laughed out loud. Immediately, her face turned bright red.
What? What are you talking about? Daniel told me I'm the cutest, you know? Maybe you're the one with bad eyesight?
She retorted sharply at me. Laughter began to leak from the audience. Emily and Daniel started to look confused. Then one of Daniel's friends burst out laughing and shouted,
Daniel, you've got terrible taste in women. Liking a girl with a face like a panda. And her body's like a panda too.
Following this comment from Daniel's friend, the whole venue erupted into laughter.
What? Aren't you being rude?
Emily yelled at Daniel's friend, but her voice was drowned out by the laughter. Yes, she did look like a panda. First, her makeup heavily lined around the eyes. With her small eyes, she really resembled a panda. And her body was full-figured, making her pink dress seem tight. Her upper arms jiggled violently with every movement. I was worried her pink dress might rip at any moment. The moment I saw her in the dressing room, I realized Daniel's taste was too peculiar. It made sense why he would call me ugly. I borrowed a microphone from the MC.
She called me ugly in the dressing room, but I wasn't upset at all. After all, she is a panda. It's amusing to be insulted by a zoo animal, isn't it? As I spoke clearly, laughter erupted from various parts of the venue. Her face turned beet red with frustration. So frustrating!
She stamped her feet in anger. Daniel glared at me. I sighed heavily at the two of them.
People who cheat have no right to glare at me.
Daniel and Emily remained silent, hit by the truth. Then I addressed the silent couple.
I'll be sure to collect the engagement breakup fee from both of you.
They immediately became defensive upon hearing about the fee.
Why should we pay a breakup fee when we aren't even registered as married? I absolutely won't pay. I won't either. I'm a freelancer. I don't have that kind of money.
Emily exclaimed. The crowd looked on in disbelief at their comments. Some even chuckled at their ridiculousness. Then a person stood up and approached us.
Daniel, enough is enough.
Daniel's boss, with a red face, yelled.
Boss! This is,
Daniel, looking perplexed, tried to make an excuse to his boss. But he seemed at a loss for words and remained confused. The boss sighed heavily at his demeanor.
What an irreparable thing you've done. Cheating openly in front of Addison, maybe it's my fault for not educating you properly.
The boss said, holding his head. His face turning pale. He seemed to be trembling slightly. Emily, looking puzzled, said,
That ugly woman is from a different company than Daniel, right? Why is Daniel's boss so worried about it?
She asked, tilting her head. Sensing something off from the boss's reaction, Daniel asked, Boss, what's wrong? My engagement breakup with Addison has nothing to do with you, right? He asked nonchalantly. Then the boss, face red with anger, shouted,
Don't you know our company's board of directors? Don't you recognize Addison's dad?
He yelled desperately. Daniel looked back and forth between the boss and my dad.
No way!
He muttered. His face turned pale. My dad's face was red with rage, veins popping.
I am a director at your company. Your future will be discussed at the board meeting.
Daniel was shocked. He tried to appease my dad in a panic.
Wait, please. It's too much for this incident to lead to that.
Daniel's friends were also surprised. They were all his colleagues, so bewildered by this turn of events. It's natural to be confused when the bride's dad is a director at your own company. Then my dad said calmly,
Weren't you planning to quit the company and live off my daughter? You just played it on the voice recorder. If you're so eager to leave the company, why don't you do it now?
That's... Daniel's face was filled with despair. And with Dad's words, Daniel's mother finally fainted. His father, John, was frantically calling her name. For her, Daniel was probably the pride and joy of the family. A well-educated graduate working in a major corporation. He must have been on a seemingly perfect elite path. But now, this incident not only derailed his elite trajectory but also cast his future into uncertainty. I had only met the in-laws once at a greeting. But they seemed like very nice and sensible people. That's why this incident must have been incredibly hard for her to accept. Daniel looked terribly bewildered by his mother fainting. And then, incredibly, Daniel yelled at me.
If you had told me your dad was a director at our company, I would have treated you better.
He accused me, completely disregarding his own actions. He seems to be pretending that nothing happened to him. That was the last straw for me. Daniel blaming me in such a situation. I didn't care what happened to him anymore. I asked Daniel with a smile.
Treat me better? Like contributing to our living expenses during cohabitation? Or not contributing money but at least staying out of housework? That's...
He faltered. I exposed to everyone that Daniel didn't contribute to living expenses and yet interfered in household matters. Daniel was now subjected to even more disdainful looks from the crowd. Especially the women there didn't seem to see him as a human anymore. Maybe they thought even a weed would be better than him. Even Emily said to him,
Daniel, you didn't pay any living expenses at all? That's really bad, isn't it?
He, realizing the gravity of the situation, turned even paler. I smiled at him. Good for you, Daniel.
You wanted to quit your job, right? You'll probably be able to quit very soon.
He looked around. Dad, glaring at him in rage. Friends looking at him with disdain. Emily, a bit in disbelief. Not a single person was on his side. In such a situation, most people couldn't stand it. Then he began to tremble and clung to me.
Addison, I was wrong. Please don't call off the engagement. I don't want to quit my job.
He apologized profusely. Sweat on his forehead. It was too late for apologies. I looked at him with cold eyes. It's over, Daniel. After being looked down upon like this, there's no going back. Just stop it.
But...
He looked like he was about to cry. I added the final blow.
Freelancer Emily and soon-to-be unemployed Daniel, a perfect match.
Emily turned pale as well. If she were burdened with an unemployed Daniel, they would both be in trouble. Quickly, Emily distanced herself from Daniel. And then, Daniel collapsed, his knees giving way.
Don't ever show up in front of me again.
I left the two of them behind and exited the venue in my wedding dress. Eventually, he left the company. The company's decision was a demotion in the guise of a department transfer. A department where his main job was sorting documents. However, many company associates had witnessed his debacle at the wedding. Leading them was our dad, a director of the company. The smart ones started keeping their distance from Daniel, and it seems he was secretly condemned by many. Consequently, he found it increasingly difficult to stay at the company. Eventually, unable to bear it, he submitted his resignation before the transfer. But leaving the company brought him further trials. It was the hefty breakup fee. The engagement breakup fee was just the going rate, not too high. But we added the wedding costs on top of it. Since the wedding turned out that way, we had to return the congratulatory money to all the guests. But the food was served, and the full cost of the wedding had to be paid. He was responsible for the disruption of the wedding, so it was decided that he would bear the cost. Daniel's parents, who were very nice people, apologized to me several times. I felt almost sorry for them. Daniel had no savings. He was flashy with money and spent whatever he had. Therefore, his parents initially shouldered the guarantee money. However, in the discussion,
"If I marry Addison, I don't have to pay, right? Then I'll register the marriage,"
Daniel argued. I felt nothing but contempt for him. And for saying that, he was severely scolded by his father, John. Eventually, an infuriated John said, "You're hopeless. I'm done with you." Daniel was visibly panicked. With no job and no home, Daniel was in a dire situation. Naturally, the apartment where Daniel and I had been living was already in the process of being vacated. I think he has to leave by the end of this month. I had already arranged movers and sent my belongings to my parents' house, leaving the apartment. After that, he kept ignoring the landlord's eviction notices. Eventually, he was sued. I found out about this because the landlord contacted me. Apparently, he had stayed there for about 3 months without paying rent. He was forcibly evicted through legal proceedings. It's unlikely that he who now disowned by his parents could return to his parents' home. Jobless and homeless, his future looked bleak. I think he has hit rock bottom. And he hasn't rebuilt anything with Emily. Through a lawyer, I demanded the guarantee money from her. I offered a condition: if she didn't reconcile with Daniel, the fee would be reduced. Without hesitation, she chose not to reconcile. "I'm not interested in someone without money or a home," she declared firmly. Apparently, Daniel reached out to her several times for help, but she ignored all his attempts. She apologized to me. "I'm really sorry. Since that wedding, everyone calls me a panda. It's been tough." I think the guests spread the word. She seemed to have realized her mistakes and reflected on her actions. But no matter her remorse, she faced constant criticism. Even at her part-time job, the panda nickname got out and she quit, being laughed at behind her back. "I'm thinking of moving far away," she said. She, forced to flee due to her careless comments with Daniel. She will likely continue to be cautious about public scrutiny. A fitting punishment for her disdainful behavior. I hope she learns from this. As for me, I passed my certification exam. The qualification is for a social insurance labor consultant. Working in general affairs, dealing with payroll and entry/exit procedures, I wanted to be more knowledgeable about labor management. This will surely motivate me more in my work. Not just in work, but I've also taken a step forward in romance. After the wedding, my friends started introducing me to men, knowing I was done with parties. I was grateful for their kindness. There's one man, introduced by a friend, with whom I've become close. He's 3 years older, hardworking, and not very handsome. Rather plain-looking. He works office administration in a small to medium enterprise, nothing glamorous. After Daniel, elite and good-looking men trigger a rejection in me. So, this man feels like someone I can be myself with. It's still early to tell how it will go. But it's a step forward. I want to cherish this one step forward for the future.